definitely more than just your hormones. So people confuse their hormone levels with, oh, I'm going to start crying more easily and just dumb shit like that. Just weird expectations people have. So I always say TRT is never going to like change your life. It's not going to like, if your life is shit, it's not going to suddenly make your life amazing. That's just a drug. I mean, it's
kind of
just
how people are. People want, you know how it is. People want a very quick magic fix. Like we had a woman come into the med spa, and we were doing a consultation with her, and she was 36. She had like 2 babies, and she wanted to lose some fat. And she was just like, "What's the fastest thing I can do?" I was like, "Lipo." And I was like, do you diet? Well, no, I tried, but blah, blah, blah. Do you exercise? No, I don't like to exercise. So what are you looking for? Like, it's
That's
like,
why I was doing an interview the other day, and I was saying at this point in time with my new patient screenings, I don't even take guys that don't lift weights anymore. I mean, I will take them if they're willing to learn. Then I would send them to someone like you. But if they're like, that's not for me, I'm like, well, motherfucker, you're not for me, because I don't want to deal with lazy ass patients. It's just like hair transplant surgeons. There's a hair transplant surgeon down in, I believe it's Reynosa, and he's one of the best in the world. Fuck, I shouldn't have said where he was. But he's gonna be so
whatever.
But anyway, it's too late. He is very selective about the patients that he does transplants on, which is why he gets such good results. Like if you tell him, I don't want to take this medicine or I don't want to do this, he's like, fuck that. I'm not even going to do one on you because I don't want to get a patient with a bad result. Yeah. So that's kind of like the same with me. If you're obese, trying to lose weight, and really what we specialize is in medical body recomposition, well, how are we going to achieve that unless you actually do the resistance training? That's the most important component. I mean, technically you don't even need any drugs if you're doing resistance training and reasonably, adjusting your diet, but definitely you cannot just do the drugs and nothing else. To me, that's lazy and not an option. And yeah, I'm pretty comfortable screening people out like that.
Yeah, that's where the Ozempic thing is coming in, because it's like everyone. So most, if not all, of my clients are women on Ozempic, and
no shit.
Yeah, well, because
most of them,
heavier.
Damn.
And they say they've tried everything, but but when people try to diet, they literally try it for like 2 weeks and they don't give it enough time. And what I've noticed with like overweight or very obese people, they'll blame their genetics, they'll blame all kinds of shit, they'll blame their kids because their kids like to eat Gushers and they're in the pantry, and apparently somebody's tying them down and shoving Gushers down their throat. But I noticed
don't buy any Gushers.
Yeah, they a lot of really obese people have a hard time taking accountability, and it's a lack of accountability and a severe lack of discipline. It's like it's really not difficult to do a handful of behaviors that make you extremely healthy, and it blows my mind at the amount of people who don't. One, exercise a little bit. 2, don't be constantly eating shit. 3, don't drink a whole lot of alcohol. But I think it's people have such a hard time managing their emotions that they use other things to feel better.
So yeah, eating is definitely an unhealthy coping strategy, but one that people use quite frequently. A lot of men do that too. We frequently think about women, stress eating, but a lot of men do that too. Hell, I used to do that. I used to be 325 pounds. So
Fuck, I forgot about that. That's nuts.
yeah. I went into residency training at about 225, came out at like 325. That was
Because of the
3
stress?
years. Insane, a lot of stress, 80-hour work weeks sometimes, not all the time, but working at night, eating horrible garbage cafeteria food and vending machine shit, and getting like hardly any exercise.
Do you think people who work night shifts are more susceptible to like metabolic disorders and
Yes.
being less healthy?
I don't think, I know for a fact. We have lots of studies that show that people who do what's called shift work,
Yeah.
meaning they work when the sun's down and sleep when the sun's up, have a greatly increased risk of all-cause mortality. They don't just have an increased risk of obesity and metabolic syndrome. They have an increased risk of dying from just about every disease you can imagine. And that's all, circadian rhythm stuff.
Don't they live like 15 years less on average, something like that? That's probably why they pay them more, because they're like, well, you're gonna die younger.
Well, that's the thing. They do that with doctors because they need doctors to work overnight, right? There has to be a doctor in the hospital because people have emergencies in the middle of the night. And you do make a lot more money if you work at night. But in my opinion, it's nowhere near enough to justify, what you do to your health. That's probably, that's a huge part of why a lot of residents in medical training, since they work the night shifts primarily, or they work a lot of them, that's why they're so unhealthy. They're so depressed. They're so stressed out. They just have totally messed up circadian rhythm. And yeah, that's why a lot of them are obese and overweight as well.
Do you think the medical pharmaceutical industry wants people to be obese and unhealthy for profit?
Yep, definitely. I mean, you think Merck that makes Ozempic wants people to be, doing the diet and exercise thing. And yeah, they want people to be fat as fucking possible. But they also want to, have it be enough of a societal like shame type of issue. That's why, I think a big part of the advertising, remember that whole body acceptance thing a few years ago where they had fat like women on billboards to try to encourage body positivity. I think what put the kibosh on that wasn't the fact that people would like think, wow, that's really disgusting that you would put an obese land whale on a billboard. Like nobody wants to actually see that at all. I think the thing that put the kibosh on it was, a lot of the pharmaceutical industry and the pressures surrounding that. Like, we can't have people just think it's okay to be fat because then they're not going to take our drugs. So we have to have people be fat, but it has to be not acceptable, so it's kind of like, it's got to be somewhere in the middle. It's kind of like, have you seen the show Landman?
Oh, I've heard of it. I've seen some clips of it.
Yeah, about with the oil. I forgot what the actor's name is. He's pretty good, but
Bob Thornton.
Basically about the oil industry, and people think, oh, the oil industry, they want gas prices to be as high as possible. No, they don't. They want oil to be between $68 and $75 a barrel. Can't be too low, can't be too high. It's got to be in the middle. So that's how the medical / pharmaceutical industry kind of looks at obesity or fat acceptance. I mean, we got to have lots of fat people, but it can't be like socially okay to be fat.
And do you think that they are discouraging like hormone replacement because it will make people healthier? I mean, now they're kind of encouraging it because they can make some money off of it. But I feel like if you started with hormone replacement therapy and then you tied in diet and exercise, I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is going to make a lot less money off that individual over the course of their life.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the pressure against HRT throughout the years has come from that direction. Most of the resistance to HRT, I mean, it's different because if you're talking about women's HRT, postmenopausal hormone replacement therapy, a lot of the issues was like cancer concerns.
Mm-hmm. And
so
then that was
I think that was a big driver. What's that?
That was completely debunked. I heard not only is there no increase in risk of prostate cancer, but a reduction in it.
Yeah. So the female side, it was, this is going to increase your risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer. And a lot of that was also debunked. As far as TRT goes, yeah, it was a widely believed myth that cancer risks were. That was a concern for a while. I think the thing that has made the medical establishment more resistant to TRT was the two things I said last week. It was that the whole steroid scandal in the 90s and people wanting to limit access to androgens so that young people didn't get their hands on them.
Makes sense.
Right, because they didn't want a bunch of TRT floating around so that young people could get a hold of their dad's testosterone. Like that was a legitimate, well, I don't know if it was a legitimate concern, but that was a concern. I hesitate to say it was completely illegitimate because, for example, we know that 90% of heroin addicts start their opioid addiction with prescription drugs, but not necessarily drugs that are prescribed to them. So the big problem with the opioid epidemic is the overprescription of like Vicodin and Percocets and shit like that. So even back in the 90s, they knew that was a problem, was people using prescription drugs not prescribed to them, getting addicted to them, and that causing problems. And that was and is a problem. So they were concerned about that with testosterone too, because they didn't want kids in high school using testosterone or using androgens.
Just like
right. And then the other thing was, there was still some concern about prostate cancer risk, but even in the 90s, we knew that probably testosterone it definitely didn't cause prostate cancer. The controversy was whether it could worsen pre-existing prostate cancer. And it turns out that it can, and it's very, very specific circumstances that probably apply to less than like 2% of people with prostate cancer. So the main concern with testosterone is and always has been the long-term cardiovascular risks. And you can thank the bodybuilders for that, because a lot of them die of heart attacks and strokes. Yeah. And so it's just like,
but at what dose? They do a ton of it, though. They do tons and tons and tons.
Yeah, so they don't do TRT doses. Certainly they don't. And very few of them check their blood pressure and all this other stuff that they should be doing. If they're going to be using those compounds at all. But yeah, those were the two main concerns. Was the cardiovascular risk and just the idea of, young people getting a hold of synthetic androgens.
Let's talk about prostate cancer, because like we were just talking before I got on here, I think like 98% of my audience is men. Mm-hmm. Now, are there any ways to reduce the likelihood of prostate cancer, or is it kind of like a genetic? Don't be obese. Okay.
Don't be obese. Don't have metabolic syndrome. When I say metabolic syndrome, I'd mean obesity. People with metabolic syndrome mostly by definition have obesity, but not all men with obesity have metabolic syndrome. So it's like 80% of obese men have metabolic syndrome. So they have obesity and dysfunctional fat tissue that causes chronic inflammation, and that chronic inflammation predisposes you to all types of cancers, prostate cancer included, colorectal cancer included. That's the biggest. I'd say that's people's biggest risk factors. There are genetic things that can predispose you to it. Off the top of my head, I can't recall exactly the types of individuals that are born with that kind of predisposition. The big problem with prostate cancer, because prostate cancer, that's the most common cancer in men in terms of like age wise. Many men will get prostate cancer. If you live long enough, you will get prostate cancer. Same with women. If you live long enough, there's a high chance you'll get breast cancer. But unlike in breast cancer, we just don't have very good screening tools for prostate cancer. We have a very old lab test called a PSA test, prostate specific antigen. And unfortunately, it's pretty shitty. I mean, it's shitty in that it's not sensitive, it's not specific. People can have elevations for all kinds of reasons. What ends up happening is people have little bumps in PSA, which could signify maybe an early prostate cancer. They go to a urologist and they get prostate biopsies. So they lay on a table and then they get, for lack of a better term, a specialized needle inserted into their rectum. Oh. And they get parts of their prostate clipped. And as you can imagine, it hurts. Yeah, I mean, it hurts really bad. And there are complications to it. You can get like sexual side effects that in rare cases may not go away. So it's not exactly a risk-free procedure. We have kind of like newer MRI screening tools that I think are helping avoid some of those biopsies. But even so, the fact is we just don't have great ways to screen men for prostate cancer or figure out like who's high risk and who isn't. Because, for example, if you're a 75-year-old guy and your PSA is a little bit elevated, probably you do have prostate cancer. But the question is like, do we really care? Because it's so slow growing in most cases that chances are the guy's going to die of something totally different long before the prostate cancer becomes a problem. So prostate cancer just in general has always been a really difficult thing for us to deal with in medicine, in primary care, in urology, in oncology. It's so common, but the screening is not really that great. And then it's also like, okay, we diagnosed this elderly guy with prostate cancer that's localized. It was like, well, what are we going to do about it? And then this ties into the whole just health infrastructure thing that we were talking about, because sure, we don't want to diagnose prostate cancer unnecessarily. And we don't want to do invasive tests on people unnecessarily. But hospitals make a lot of money doing those tests. So, that plays a role too, sadly.
So what do you think?
Some of that seeps into the guidelines as well.
Other than staying lean, are there like certain types of diet approaches that will minimize the risk of prostate cancer? Are there certain types of foods that may,
Not sure. I don't think so. Over the years, there have been a lot of epidemiologic studies looking at various supplements, various types of diets. And you know how these long-term studies in epidemiology work. I mean, this population that ate grape seed extract or whatever the fuck for decades, they have a slightly decreased risk of prostate cancer. But there's a million things that could be confounders, in there. So I don't think so. Another big risk factor, though, that should be managed is if you have low testosterone levels. Low testosterone levels are a risk factor for prostate cancer, actually. That's for men that are like really hypogonadal. So their levels, it's not like borderline, it's like your levels are really suppressed. So not being obese definitely is probably the biggest thing. Not having low testosterone levels is another big thing. I think those are the two biggest things. As far as like supplements, foods, things, I don't know. There's a ton of environmental endocrine disrupting chemicals that probably increase your risk for various types of cancers, including prostate cancer. like phthalates, I believe. Phthalates are in a lot of like perfumes or colognes and stuff. So that can be an issue, which sucks because I have a huge cologne collection. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to really. The biggest thing is just is obesity. I would say. As far as what's the best diet, I don't know. The best diet would be the diet that helps you not be obese.
This guy asked about paleo diet. My thoughts on paleo diet. Well, it really kind of depends. Some people call paleo diet like eating everything raw, no refined carbohydrates, stuff like that. I think it's silly. I don't think there's anything particularly special about it other than, a lot of these diets, if you adhere to, just a small selection of different foods, you're cutting out a lot of the super high calorie foods you were eating before, putting yourself in calorie restriction and losing weight. What do you think about this whole paleo thing? I mean, do you think we really need to eat like our ancient ancestors that only lived to be about 40 years old? Do you think we need to eat like them? I don't think people realize that. They glorify our ancient ancestors like they were these jacked fucking supermen. Dude, they died of disease all the time, basic infections, and they only lived to be about 40, 45 years old. So, no, I think paleo diet's kind of dumb.
Yeah, I think all that ancestral diet shit is stupid and idiotic because again, there's a lot of confounding variables. Like there's that guy Weston A. Price who studied, I think, indigenous people in the early 1900s and found that they lived longer and they were very lean and healthy, in contrast to the people in the West that were getting increasingly fat and with more chronic disease. And he's like concluded, okay, these are the things they eat, so therefore let's replicate this in Western societies, and they can be just as healthy as these indigenous people. But the biggest confounder there, I think, is the sunlight issue and circadian rhythms. What are those people? Those people live very different than we do in the West. They get regular sunlight. I mean, they're very active, obviously.
They're not fat.
Right.
None of them.
So, I mean, I think circadian rhythm really is the major confounder in pretty much every study on diet that we can think of. That's kind of why I don't really focus too much on it, because it's just like I said, people that with great body composition that eat like shit. It's funny. I was hearing a story about Chad Johnson. You remember him?
He ate McDonald's every friggin' day.
Exactly. What did he get? He got a Big Mac and a huge Coke.
They used to have a team. If you watch the show Hard Knocks, where they go into like training camp, this guy, everybody would be sitting down in the cafeteria where they have like unlimited selection of any food, top-notch food. This guy walks in with a bag of McDonald's and outperforms everybody.
Yeah. But the thing is, there's a lot of people like that.
I was like that. My God, in high school, me and my friend Pat used to go to McDonald's every day. And we would eat, what would we eat? 3 or 4 double cheeseburgers. That's back when they were $1. Like 4 double cheeseburgers and 4 apple pies. And I was 168 pounds and playing football at a high level.
Yeah, that's the thing. So like, there's two things. There's that example of people that eat like shit and have great body composition, and people that eat very well, that if you even touch them with a Twinkie, they blow up. So what accounts for that? It's the same thing that accounts for what this guy Weston A. Price found in those indigenous societies. Some people are just born with better engines than others. So if your mitochondria can utilize substrates effectively, like I was saying, you could, your diet could be fairly poor, but you're still going to maintain good body composition. Whereas if you have a very high heteroplasmy rate, meaning you have damaged, defective, mutated, poorly functioning mitochondria, particularly if they're in your liver or your skeletal muscle or your fat cells, diets, man, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to lose weight even with caloric restriction. But then the confounder there is, why do people lose weight when they fast? They don't take in any calories. Well, it goes back to what I was saying about the metabolic inflexibility. When your mitochondria are traffic jammed and can't function well with the substrates that you already have, not adding more fuel is obviously going to alleviate that in part.
They're going to clear it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, it's back to is obesity really a condition of energy excess, or is it a condition of energy inefficiency?
I think
I look at it like an
individual.
Yeah, and it's highly individualistic.
Yes. Sometimes they're just eating too much. Sometimes, because I've had clients like that. I've had clients that, they'll lose like 80 pounds, get down to like 160, 170, but they still got like this fat tissue that I don't think will really ever go away. And what I tell them is like, it's probably genetics. But in all honesty, if they were like locked up in a box and not fed, probably go away. But
yeah,
as soon as they resume normal eating, it'll probably come back. So the problem is, we see all these really good looking physiques and the genetic phenoms are rising to the top, and people have, gotten under the impression they can kind of sculpt their body into whatever they want it to be. And, they may get to somebody may get down to 160 pounds and that's just it for them. They're not going to be like lean looking, right? You think there's like genetic barriers to that?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely genetic barriers, and people are born with different somatotypes or body types, and so they deposit fat in different areas, preferentially compared to other people. So yeah, the answer is definitely yes. People forget that the way your adipocytes work, your white adipose tissue work, particularly your subcutaneous adipose tissue, is the cells, the individual adipocytes can grow to like 50 times their size. So what happens is you shrink them, but they always maintain the ability to balloon up again. So it's the same kind of the same thing as some of your skeletal muscle too, right? We talk about muscle memory and the ability for people. I mean, all about that, right? People who were really jacked at a young age, they find even in older ages, it's relatively easy. Maybe not easy isn't the word, but it's definitely possible to regain a lot of that because you maintain a lot of those myonuclei that you built when you were younger. We even have studies on people that have used steroids and stopped using them 10 years ago, and they maintain a great majority of the myonuclei that they built during their synthetic androgen use. So that's to say, yeah, I mean, it kind of works the same way.
What do you think about, it just reminded me of something when you said white adipose cells. Now I've seen in the fitness industry a lot of talk about brown fat, and that fasting and cold water submersion or ice baths get rid of brown fat. What is brown fat?
Well, they stimulate brown fat. So brown fat is thermogenic. So it's what is supposed to keep you warm, because in your brown fat you have mitochondria that are poorly coupled. So basically the way that what happens is, instead of generating energy directly, they release a lot of heat. So what happens with cold water immersion over time is not only you activate that brown fat and those mitochondria because you're fucking freezing, your body tries to warm itself.
Yeah.
But also, there's studies showing that you can have what's called browning of your white adipose tissue. So some of the white adipose tissue that you have converts to a like brown phenotype with poorly coupled mitochondria. And so that's part of the benefit of cold water immersion.
Is there any other way to get the same effect without cold water immersion? Like, is brown fat bad?
No.
Do we want to reduce it?
You don't want to reduce your brown fat. You want more brown fat and less.
Do we want to convert the white phenotype to the brown phenotype?
Well, that's another thing. Do you want to convert a lot of it? I mean, another thing is like your subcutaneous fat, believe it or not, is actually metabolically beneficial. So sub-Q fat has anti-inflammatory properties. People don't realize that, but it's true. This is actually a big reason why women live longer than men, is because before menopause, when they have, high estrogen levels, they preferentially deposit fat in subcutaneous stores as opposed to internally, like around your internal organs. So subcutaneous fat is actually beneficial. You don't want to get rid of all your subcutaneous fat. This is why like having 5% body fat is not so great longevity wise, for example. Mm-hmm. Okay, we know people around 12 to 15% live the longest. And that confused researchers for a while because we started getting studies showing that there were people with high BMIs with certain diseases that lived longer than people with low BMIs. We found that in heart disease. We found that in chronic kidney disease. We even found that in just aging in general. And that was called the obesity paradox. So it's like fat people live longer than thinner people. Well, it wasn't really that simple. It was just that it was more like the phenotype of those people. So, and it was only in the setting really of chronic disease. So when you have a chronic disease, if you have low amounts of skeletal muscle mass, your BMI will tend to be lower. And it's the low muscle mass that confers increased mortality risk. But also, if you have low amounts of sub-Q fat and more visceral fat, you have a more inflammatory phenotype as well. That's why, you see cancer patients that are real thin and cachectic. That's not good. That's not good. That's but that's true even in people with COPD or emphysema. Actually, the fat people that smoke their whole life that develop COPD and stay kind of fat tend to live longer than the real thin ones. So that's called the obesity paradox, but it's not really an obesity paradox so much as it is a BMI paradox. And it has to do with the fact that people with a little more muscle mass and more sub-Q as opposed to visceral fat, tend to do better when they have chronic diseases. So yeah, you don't want to get rid of all your sub-Q fat. You really want to focus on getting rid of the visceral fat. The visceral fat is by far and away the biggest problem because visceral fat secretes pro-inflammatory, what they're called adipose cytokines, like IL-6.
Cytokines, right?
Yep, TNF alpha. Mm-hmm. And these are very, very pro-inflammatory. TNF alpha actually interferes with a lot of androgen signaling and interferes with, is one of the reasons why you develop hypogonadism is because of how it interferes with like the brain's production of gonadotropins. That's just one of many ways. So visceral fat is a big problem, but the good thing is testosterone reduces visceral fat. Testosterone also reduces subcutaneous fat. This is the reason why if you're older and you're a little bit overweight, but you have healthy metabolism. So you have what's called metabolically healthy obesity. So technically on a scale, you fall into the obese range. but you don't have diabetes. You don't even have pre-diabetes. You don't have any insulin resistance at all. What that means is that you just have really good genetics and maybe some environmental things that have, even though you stored a little bit of excess subcutaneous fat, you don't have the inflammatory component of it. And so that's why you don't want to put every obese male on testosterone, because testosterone is going to reduce their sub-Q fat. But if their metabolism's already perfect, not perfect, I mean, is already really good, you're really not doing them a long-term benefit. This is also the reason why there's a guy named Neil Barzai. He's a physician in New York. He studies octogenarians or centenarians, people that live over 100. The phenotype of those people that live super long is they're little fat guys, like not super fat, but they're a little bit, they're overweight. They're not like jacked, Sylvester Stallone from 15 years ago looking types guys. They're not. So yeah, I mean, fat people don't understand fat quite as well. There is a phenotype of obesity that is metabolically healthy, actually. It's only like 15 to 20% of obesity. And unfortunately, even most people that have metabolically healthy obesity go on to develop metabolic syndrome over time. That's why they still should be, treated with weight loss interventions, just not necessarily like testosterone per se.
Let's see. Here's a question. Is there a way to improve your energy efficiency, or is that entirely genetic? I would guess improving improving function of the mitochondria and mitochondrial proliferation will improve.
Yep.
And that comes through exercise. What do you think?
Exactly. Exercise, definitely. Fasting, intermittent fasting, circadian rhythm stuff, seeing morning sunlight, all those things that, reduce mitochondrial damage or promote what's called mitochondrial autophagy and apoptosis, which is how you recycle your bad mitochondria, is really important. This is why sleep problems are a really big harbinger of metabolic disease, because if you have poor sleep, you don't get enough sleep, you have fragmented sleep. During sleep is when you recycle a lot of your bad mitochondria. And the most ancient hormone that we know of is primarily responsible for it, called melatonin. Melatonin is actually produced by mitochondria in just about every single celled organism that we know of. We associate it, and a lot of these supplement scammers say melatonin, that's the hormone of sleep. That's why you got to buy my $100, Chinese made capsules on Amazon, so you can have better sleep. Well, the reason why melatonin promotes sleep is because melatonin is a master regulator of mitochondrial recycling, autophagy, and apoptosis. So it's only your brain pineal melatonin that actually promotes sleep onset. 99% of the melatonin you make is elsewhere in your body and has nothing to do with sleep at all whatsoever. Like a lot of melatonin comes from your gut, actually, and your microbiome. So that's the purpose of melatonin. And it's the oldest hormone we know, because the earliest cells that had mitochondria, you think of mitochondria as engines. Well, engines release heat, and engines get damaged over time. That happens to car engines too. They release sparks, and if they're not maintained, eventually the engine can actually damage the other components in the cell or in the car. And that's a problem. That's why they need servicing. So your mitochondria are the same way. Melatonin is really what is one of the master regulators at causing defective mitochondria to be recycled or eliminated. And so, yeah.
Is there a
there's
way?
lots of ways.
I've met a lot of people who have poor sleep. Do you have any recommendations for improving their sleep?
Early morning sunlight on your naked eye and wearing blue light blocking glasses after sundown. Those are the two biggest things, you know. But we really need the early morning sunlight. That's really hugely important. And not behind a window and not with contact lenses on, because contact lenses will block certain frequencies of light. And so that's no bueno. You really need your naked eye exposed to early morning sunlight. And then after sundown, you want to block the frequencies of light that you are supposed to only get in the morning and afternoon. And the way you do that is with blue blocking glasses. Very cheap ones you can get on Amazon that work just fine. They have to be red tinted though. If they're clear lenses, those don't do it. Those are not sufficient.
Blue light.
So those are the two biggest things.
Let's see this. Is there any way to boost basal metabolism even more outside of adding muscle tissue and improving mitochondrial function? Is there?
Those are the most effective ways for just normal people. You're definitely increasing your skeletal muscle mass is I think by far and away the best way to do it.
Yeah. Even more. I mean, how fast you want your metabolism to be. I mean, I think people maybe they want to be able to eat 5,000 calories a day and not gain any weight. But here's the thing. If you were ridiculously active and strong, you can get away with that. Like I think about it back in high school, like I was eating, 1,600 calories. I was eating about a 2,200 calorie lunch. And that wasn't my only meal of the day. Not gaining any weight, but when we're younger, a lot of us are extremely active. Here's a good question. Does eating close to going to sleep have negative impacts?
Yes, nighttime feeding is really not good for your metabolism. It's especially bad if you already have metabolic syndrome and you already have insulin resistance, because like I said, you develop metabolic inflexibility. You can't actually even use the substrates you already have. And at nighttime, the way your circadian rhythm works and the way your mitochondria are regulated, you're not meant to do a lot of metabolic work while you're asleep, in the sense of like burning, taking in fuel and doing digestion and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely bad. Yeah, nighttime feeding is really it's not good.
Well, I've noticed if I eat like a decent sized meal before going to bed, I have interrupted sleep. I wake up in the morning feeling more groggy, and it's probably what I thought it was the glucose increased brain activity and kind of prevented REM sleep. Is that along the lines of what's happening?
I don't know about that. There's something going on. It definitely can cause sleep issues. So that's not surprising. And especially if you eat garbage at night, like people that smoke weed at night to go to sleep, right? Because I just use cannabis for sleep. Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with people do. That's fine. But if you get the munchies along with it, that's a problem, because then you eat a lot of your calories at night. Yeah, that can definitely worsen metabolic dysfunction and disease. So, yeah, really, you're meant to have most of your calories in the earlier part of the day.
Do you think smoking weed is bad for sleep before bed, or good?
I doubt it's good. Is it bad?
I heard this.
I don't know about just in general. I know that there have been studies looking at the effects on the brain of using like synthetic androgens in combination with cannabis, and the cannabis actually increased the neurotoxicity of the compounds. So that's scary, because that probably also applies to just testosterone too. That's kind of the reason why I tell TRT patients, just, if you can avoid cannabis, it's probably the best way to go. And then unfortunately in the last 2-3 years, because there's been a lot of like legalization of cannabis around the country, there's also been a increase in studies on like the cardiovascular effects of cannabis. And it looks like cannabis is not so benign for the heart. It's not nearly as benign as we used to think. So, yeah.
What about alcohol? How does alcohol affect your metabolism, or does it not? Is there something damaging that it can do?
Well, alcohol is a mitochondrial toxin. It directly damages mitochondria. So I think that's the big issue. And in the liver in particular, that's a problem. Your liver is one of the most important metabolic organs. So yeah, if you get an increased heteroplasmy rate in your liver and you damage a lot of your hepatocytes with alcohol, yep, that's going to have metabolic consequences. I've never met an alcoholic, like a true alcoholic, that was metabolically healthy. Have you?
No, I haven't really. Also, I haven't really met a true alcoholic that's in shape. Now that I think about it, they're all over fat. And so, what about like the beer belly, the beer gut? Is that like a visceral fat thing, or is that like a water retention thing? What is it?
Nope, that's visceral fat. That's like omental fat in the mesentery overlying your abdominal organs.
So beer
that's a big problem.
Visceral fat, but is it alcohol alone, or is it like something with
no? That's a misnomer that it's that it's all alcohol driven. A beer gut is just, I don't know how that appellation, I don't know where that came from, but it's just kind of like you think of your average American dad, that drinks Budweiser every night or whatever. Not even every night, but that's, I don't know. It's just kind of like in our mind. That's just metabolic syndrome.
Okay.
And so people who don't drink any alcohol can get a so-called beer gut. So it's not really, beer per se.
It's not just the beer. Okay. Because I always wondered that.
Right.
Going to sleep. If any of you guys got any other questions about stuff, are there any supplements you think that might help improve sleep outside of melatonin? I heard, what was it? Potassium and magnesium, was it? Or something. I don't know. I'm not huge into supplements. I don't really know shit about them.
Me either. I honestly, I think the best way, I don't even use melatonin. I think the best way to improve your sleep is, like I said, just preserve the melatonin that your brain already produces. And the best way to do that is by protecting your eyes from artificial light after sundown. And that's inconvenient because people walk around and they think they look goofy in orange colored glasses. But there are studies showing that it's effective, And I worry about taking melatonin just because, melatonin does so many things. It's not just, this is the hormone that makes me fall asleep. Like I said, it has profound mitochondrial effects. So, and the other thing is, even melatonin at times has been shown to be fairly ineffective. I mean, it's one of those things, for some people it works amazingly, and other people it doesn't do shit, even at super high doses. I've seen people take 50, 60 milligrams of melatonin and it do absolutely nothing.
Could be placebo. They think it's going to make them fall asleep, and they convince themselves that they're sleepy and that the melatonin's working. And there is some value to placebo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
How long before sleeping should you eat to avoid the negative side effects? I'm curious about that too.
Maybe like 3 to 4 hours. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The best practice is to avoid eating after sundown, period. that's hard to do because the sun goes down at 4 o'clock in the autumn and winter in South Dakota.
Yeah.
So, but definitely a few hours at least. You don't want to gorge yourself and then people put themselves in a food coma like after Thanksgiving. If that's your pattern of eating, that's no good. As far as how many hours before sleep, it's probably like 3 to 4 at least.
What about like your first meal of the day? Do you think because personally, I don't like to eat until about usually like 1 or 2, like this time. I did eat an hour before though, because I trained yesterday and I was super hungry today because of that. But you think fasting in the morning has benefit? I mean, it must.
Yeah, for some people probably. But like I said, I think fasting in the evening, if you can, is even better. But that's very hard to do. A lot of people can find it's much easier to fast in the morning than it is in the evening. Yeah, because you're busy. For some reason, I'm just not really hungry in the morning. A lot of people just aren't really hungry in the morning.
Do you think that's a sign of metabolic efficiency? Not being hungry
to not be hungry in the morning? I don't think so. I think that if anything, that may just be a sign of some circadian rhythm disruption, actually. Because if you think about it, that's when your cellular machinery is designed to do the bulk of its metabolism is during sunlight, when the sun is out. And so, yeah, if you're not hungry in the morning, but you're really hungry at night, that can be that can signify hormonal issues with your like ghrelin, leptin, 2 hormones intimately tied into metabolic syndrome, that those are potentially disrupted. So I don't know if it's a good thing. It's probably not a good thing. It's probably a good thing to wake up hungry and not feel hungry in the evening.
So it'd probably be better, like, to maybe eat late morning and then late afternoon and then just avoid eating the rest of the day after that. I find myself not eating all day until it's nighttime, and it sounds like the opposite of that is actually good.
Yeah, probably. But I do the same thing you do most of the time too. So
part of being busy, I guess. Let's see.
Right.
Any tips on how to sleep through the night without waking up to use the restroom? I'm in my 60s and take in my fluids at around 4 p.m., go to bed at 9. Some nights I'm able to fall right back asleep. It's funny because most nights I'll wake up at least once to take a piss. And I think it's because I'll be watching TV and I'll drink like 2 of these fucking things. I'm like thirsty for some reason. But some people, wouldn't that be kind of like a sign of prostate something if you're waking up at night to pee?
If you're in your 60s and you have a lot of episodes of nocturia, you're waking up and going to urinate a lot, that can be a symptom of that you don't completely empty your bladder during the day because your prostate is enlarged. That's one potential cause. Another potential cause is sleep apnea. Because if you have untreated sleep apnea, what happens is you get micro arousals, and what happens when you don't fully breathe, is kind of oversimplifying it a little bit. You end up putting a lot of pressure on your heart, and your heart releases certain hormones like atrial natriuretic peptide, ANP, and these cause you to urinate to eliminate some of your blood volume and take pressure off of your heart. So, yeah, those are the 2 big causes of nocturia: is benign prostatic hyperplasia and untreated sleep apnea. Those are probably the 2 biggest causes.
Without like a sleep study, is there anything? Because I honestly think I might have sleep apnea because I'm heavy. Are there any? Because I heard something like neck circumference can be an indicator of sleep apnea, or body weight, or indicator of likelihood of sleep apnea. Is there anything?
Yes. Well, if your neck circumference is large, that's associated with sleep breathing disorders.
Shit.
Yes. Another thing people don't realize is there's a lot of people with obstructive sleep apnea that are normal body weight. So it's not just limited to obese people either. I have sleep apnea and I have normal body weight. Now I do. I didn't always used to, but I've been, at about 205, 210 for the last 3 years. But losing all that weight actually didn't completely eliminate my sleep apnea. It got a little bit better, but it didn't go away completely. So yeah, having a huge neck circumference there's a correlation there. Doesn't mean if you have a big neck circumference that you definitely have sleep apnea. Most men that are obese, and snore, they have sleep apnea. I mean, yeah, you could get a sleep study because you got to prove it for their insurance to pay for the fucking machine and everything, or the mandibular advancement device, however it's going to be treated. But you can diagnose sleep apnea without a sleep study in a lot of cases just by looking at someone's body composition and their wife telling them that they, snore like a truck.
I do.
It'd be pretty easy. Pretty easy. Yeah.
And the only way to really treat it is with the CPAP machine. You got to sleep with that thing.
I couldn't use a CPAP machine.
Yeah,
for a lot of reasons.
Shitty.
It's first of all, I used to think like patients, just use your fucking CPAP machine. Like, why are you making all these excuses why you can't use it? Until I tried using it. Nope. It makes me feel like I'm suffocating. Like I couldn't get used to it, even with a nasal pillow, a mask, whatever. So I couldn't do it. It was just very uncomfortable, and it limits like how you can move during sleep. Yeah. So I said, fuck that. The other thing is, if you have an active sex life, I mean, what chick wants to sleep next to fucking Darth Vader?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so that's the other problem. So what can you do instead of the CPAP machine? You can get what's called a MAD, M-A-D, mandibular advancement device. These are mouthpieces that are specially designed by a sleep dentist. So these are dentists that specialize in sleep dentistry. And they can make you a device that pulls your jaw forward and changes your anatomy kind of while you're asleep. They have wires on them so they can be adjusted to the right dimensions or whatever. And the studies show those work actually pretty well. Even in severe sleep apnea, a lot of patients get significant benefits from it. A lot of my colleagues that are sleep medicine doctors, they'll roll their eyes like all these mandibular advancement devices. They don't always work as good as CPAP machines. Okay, but I'm not going to wear a fucking CPAP machine. Right. Period. I'm not going to wear it at all. And there's a lot of men that are just like, I'm not wearing that. I don't care. I could die 10 years earlier. I'm not, this messes up my sex life. It's annoying. It makes me, I just don't like it and I'm not going to use it. So the MAD device is better than nothing, but a lot of studies do show it works just as well, especially if you have mild or moderate. And there are even some severe cases, studies showing that the severe cases, the MAD devices work very, very well. So that's an option people can look into. It's not heavily utilized. The way you get it paid for is usually you have to use a CPAP first. And then your insurance company, when you can, go to your doctor, say, I can't use the CPAP. I tried this. They'll make you switch masks to first they'll give you a full mask, then they'll give you a nasal pillow or vice versa. They make you do some things. And then when you finally say, yeah, nothing, I can't really tolerate any of it, then they'll pay for a sleep dentist to make the device for you, or you can pay out of pocket. They are expensive though to pay out of pocket.
I'm looking at one online.
What's that?
One online for $100.
Those don't work.
Oh,
unfortunately. When you look at a real MAD device, it's not something you mold it like you steam in water and put in your mouth. It's not like a mouth guard. These are things that are specially calibrated to your dentition and have adjustable wires on them that the dentist or even you can move so you can get your jaw positioning correct. So it has to be designed specially for your dentition and your specific craniofacial anatomy. So all these Amazon devices that you can buy that are very cheap, the studies on most of those show those don't work hardly very good at all. But the MAD devices do work. Unfortunately, my ex-girlfriend threw out my MAD device. I don't think she did it on purpose, hopefully. But yeah, they're expensive though. I mean, to replace, especially if your insurance doesn't pay for them. But I try to get people on them if, they say they can't do the CPAP. And I don't give people trouble for not being able to use the CPAP. If you can use it and it doesn't bother you, that's great, because the CPAP will make your sleep much better. I mean, it's amazing how well they work. But unfortunately,
it's just not practical.
I don't like. Yeah, I mean, it fucks my sex life. It's just not a sexy thing to have a mat. I mean,
it can't be comfortable either, because you can only sleep on your back. Like,
it's not comfortable. Some give you a little bit more mobility and stuff, but the thing is, there's just still something attached to your face, so you can't. If you're a side sleeper, it's annoying having a fucking tube like in the way that you can't like roll over. You have to be careful so you don't roll over on it, and it makes a lot of noise too. I mean, some of the newer ones make hardly any noise at all, but if you have a bed partner and stuff, it's just not. Like I said, it's not. It's just not. It's not ideal for some guys.
Well, hey, my girlfriends have always slept through my crazy fucking snoring, so I'm gonna keep doing it.
Mine too, where they don't complain about it that much.
Well, you just got to put them to sleep real well, and then you can snore all you want.
Exactly. It's funny when you sleep with a chick, like some of them snore, and that to me that's like, ew, you're
weird,
right?
Snore.
But I know when I go to sleep, I'm fucking.
But yeah, when I was younger, my father used to come and I'd sleep with my door open sometimes and come in and he'd have to shut it because I fucking hear you snoring from across the house. I was like,
yeah, my kids make fun of me sometimes too. Thankfully losing weight has helped a lot in the past few years with it, but there are a lot of normal weight people, healthy body count that have sleep apnea, and unfortunately it's a problem. And like that guy asked, yeah, it can cause you to urinate because you put pressure on your heart. That's really one of the main reasons why untreated sleep apnea is not good for you and is associated with heart disease and high blood pressure and things like that, is because of the mechanics of what happens when you essentially stop breathing. And not to mention all the things it does to your sleep cycle, because you get micro arousals, so you don't wake up in the sense that you become conscious, but you don't really fully fall asleep. Right. So when you look at a polysomnogram, or what's called a type 1 sleep study report, you can see, holy shit, this guy technically wakes up 40 times an hour. He doesn't realize he's doing that, but that's essentially what his brain is doing. That can happen in really severe forms of sleep apnea.
And you're going to feel exhausted the next day if that's going on, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you can have sleep apnea for decades. It's untreated. And I heard a lecture my last year residency by a neurologist who's also a sleep medicine specialist, who unfortunately, a lot of patients, they have it untreated for so long, it starts to damage the alertness promoting regions of their brain, so that even if they get treated after several years of it being untreated, they don't wake up refreshed because they've caused damage to the parts of their brain, for lack of a better way of explaining it. The only way to cure those people's what's called excessive daytime somnolence, number one, you make sure that they're compliant with their, using their machine or whatever they're using. So you do a sleep study and see, his AHI, apnea hypopnea index, is around 0. So he's using it. I mean, he's not having any arousals. but he still feels exhausted. He still is falling asleep while he's fucking driving. That's not good. That's why they test semi-truck drivers for sleep apnea, that you have to, by law, in every U.S. state get cleared that you don't have sleep apnea. And if you do have sleep apnea, you have to give them what's called a download of your device to make sure that, you know, you're actually using the machine. So they don't want people falling asleep while they're driving. But in those cases where it's severe and untreated for long periods of time, and even the standard treatments don't cure their sleepiness, they have to be put on like ADHD drugs, amphetamines, stimulants.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's not pleasant long-term side effects of those.
It's not ideal to put what are generally fat older guys on amphetamine like stimulants. Generally, it's not like seen as the greatest thing. But if the alternative is they fall asleep when they're driving, yeah. I mean, you know, what's got to be done has got to be done.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for joining. Chris is going to join me every Friday, and we're just going to talk about shit and get some value out of his big old brain.
Yeah, I'll try not to nuke it too much the night before like I did last night. I had one too many Dos Equis.
Oh, boy.
You know, not good, but you got to live while you're alive a little bit.
Yeah, that's the thing about male optimization too. Like, we don't need to be perfect. We can be healthy, but we still have to be able to live. You know what I mean? We still have to enjoy shit. So
there's a lot to be said for quality of life.
Right. So
you can be super healthy and be like that Brian Johnson guy that's turned himself into a fucking lab experiment.
That dude's
I personally would rather die earlier and, you know, have a few cervezas, have, you know, some steaks, tacos, and some, you know, shapely Latinas at the right points in time, than live that kind of lab rat type of life. I mean, that personally for me, you know, 100% abstinence from everything that's bad for you is 100% abstinence from fun too.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's got to be reasonable. You can't overdo it, but you gotta live while you're alive, right?
You can have a long life and a boring life. You're right. I'd rather have a short, fulfilling, fun one.
Exactly.
All right, guys. We'll see you next Friday. Follow Dr. Chris on, let's see,
TikTok, YouTube.
What's your TikTok?
C Bronson, MD.
C Bronson.
Bronson.
Bronson, MD. Whoops. TikTok.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for talking.
See you next week.
See you guys next Friday.